everybody, today we're going to work on the 6-inch block project for January's perfectly pieced digital version. You may have already seen my video featuring this block. This is an 8-inch block with 2-inch borders. This is for the perfectly pieced 2026 mystery quilt. I'll link this information below. This is a separate project that I'm running to help us make the most out of our perfectly pieced blocks for the year. I'll put a link below for this free information packet. It tells you all about the mystery project, sizes of quilts, fabrics, borders, and all of that good information. Today we'll be making the featured 6-inch block project. I'm going to be using different colors. I'll show you how I selected my colors. Before we jump into this, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what you get with Perfectly Pieced Digital, since this is new for the year 2026. Some people are transitioning from the physical box to digital only. I'll show you what you get with the digital version, and then we'll jump into our project. When you subscribe to Perfectly Pieced Digital, everything comes in a digital format, so you don't get anything in the mail. You just get a file attachment. It's probably going to look like this. These are screenshots from my computers. I have a Windows computer. Inside the file, there are some folders. There's instructions and resources, embroidery files, projects, and quilting, and I'll show you what's in each one of these folders. Instructions and resources has the Perfectly Pieced Getting Started guide, digital contents explained in a PDF document, the general resource guide, instructions for single block and single block with quilting. These are all separate PDF files, so you can open them and read them or print them. Like this is a PDF file. This is the block project instructions. I've opened that and printed that. In the embroidery files, you're going to want to select the file type for your embroidery machine. I have a Baby Lock, which is PES. Same file type as Brother. You can see here I've got a 2-inch block, a 2-inch block with quilting, same for 4-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch. And you'll see this when we go over to the machine to work on our project. The digital version now contains what they're calling evergreen projects, and I'll show you those. The featured project, which is what we're going to be working on today, and quilting projects. The quilting projects all have their own file. Here's an example of the 4-inch quilt calculations. What you get with the quilt calculations are materials needed for different sizes: crib, lap, twin, full, queen, and king. And then there's pictures and layouts for everything, just using that particular size block, and there's one of these for each block size. Inside the quilting files folder, this month we have the KDQ 2601 floral 20, and then the border. Inside this folder, the floral 20, you have embroidery files and instructions, and then inside the border folder you have embroidery files and instructions. I did print out the instructions for the border file to show you. Here's an example of the instructions. This month is the teacup border. It gives you pictures of all the sizes. It explains about how borders work. There's explanations and pictures inside. There's a little chart to help you with your fabric and your batting. And then if you go further through the border instructions, there's some pictures that show you how to line up and connect your borders. And we'll be doing that today when we work on our project. I did print out pictures of the evergreen files, and these all have separate instructions, but I wanted to show this to everybody in case you were thinking about Perfectly Pieced, not sure if you wanted to subscribe or not. Here's what came this month with the evergreen projects. We got a tote bag, another tote bag. Now I have a video on my channel for this tote bag. This came with one of the Perfectly Pieced projects in 2025. I'll link that below for you. And I think that's where these come from, but you can see how this says 4-inch block tote, 8-inch block tote. You can use any 4-inch block, any 8-inch block. So if you like the layouts of these, you can use your teacup blocks for any of these evergreen projects. There's a stocking project, rectangle pin cushion. Now I did not get this Perfectly Pieced subscription, but I recognize the cats. I'm allergic to cats, that's why I don't have that one. There's a square pin cushion project, and there's a trivet project. You get instructions for all of these evergreen projects. Let's talk about picking fabrics. I know some of you are going from the box subscription to digital, aren't really sure about how to pick fabrics. I'm going to talk about how I pick fabrics, and I'm also going to link a video series below by Just Get It Done Quilts. She did a whole video series on the color wheel, the color theory, picking colors for quilts. It applies to this as well. When I look at this project, the first thing I thought was we've got a nice big square right here in the middle where the teacup is. It's a 5 by 5.5 piece of fabric. So you'll have some seam allowance. I would think of it as a 4.5 inch square. That would be an easy way to think about it. So if you've got fabric with big prints like Tula Pink or Cafe, maybe you've got some of those fun Kimberbell fabrics like the Halloween one that has the different haunted houses on it. I have that one. So things like this with a big print, this is the Candy Corn Quilt Shop. When you go to cut your fabric, you can center that design and then that would be on your cup. While I have this out, if you're ever unsure of fabrics, you can always do things for your favorite holiday. You could make 4 little Halloween teacups. That would be really cute. Christmas teacup, Valentine. You can also look up different seasonal colorways, and I talked about that in the mystery quilt video, but let me show you really quick. Here's my really old phone. I've got the DuckDuckGo browser open. That blocks a lot of ads. Let's say you want fall colors. So we'll just type in fall colors. You can see right away it brings up some images. You can work with these, or at the top, most browsers have something like this, says all images. So click on images. You see this picture right here? It gives you colors. They're probably paint colors, but if you like these colors, you could take this into a fabric store and look for colors that match these little samples. Another fun thing to do with this project is to look up teacups. So you type in teacups, and then we'll look at images of teacups. I'm going to click images, and you get pictures of what I consider kind of classic teacups. But as you go through, this can give you ideas. Let's say you like pink. There's pink, white, and gold. Maybe you're not a pink person. Here's nice reds, yellow, green. I do like how they're trimmed in gold. You could always add a little gold to this. Maybe give it a little gold handle and a gold bottom. If you don't want to use metallics, you can use yellow. Those are a couple different ways you can come up with ideas for this project. For me, I went to my fabric stash. I'll be honest, I have a very large fabric stash. I worked for many years as a pharmacist, long hours, good pay. If I got frustrated, I bought fabric. Let's look at what I pulled for this project. Let's start with the big pieces here, the teacups. I actually remembered I bought some really fun teacup fabric. I haven't used it yet. I make bags. I saw this when it came out. I'm almost 100% certain you can still get it. I'll link it below. It's by Crystal Manning. Let me show you the selvage. It's from the, it looks like Julia fabric line by Crystal Manning, Moda. It's got teapots, birds, teacups, florals, leaves. I think that's really pretty, and what I like is that I happen to have bought 2 different colorways, and when we look at this project, we've got 2 cups here and 2 cups here. Now you can do all 4 the same, all 4 different. You could make 2 cups, and then here you could just put a fabric square and do the quilting with a colored thread. Maybe you have some favorite teas. You could do a fabric square and use the font on your machine and type out things like Earl Grey, lavender, orange pekoe, whatever your favorite teas are, and then you could type out maybe time for tea. You might have some tea embroidery designs, so you don't have to make 4 cups if you don't want to make 4 cups. I'm going to, since I've got these 2 colorways. I'll make 2 with the white and 2 with the blue. I've got my cup fabrics picked out. Now I need the bottom of the cup and the handle, and since I've got pretty bold prints, I'm going to go with a solid for that. In 2023, I joined Fat Quarter Shop's Solid of the Month Club. I made this really neat quilt. It's called the Sandpiper quilt, and it did not use a lot of fabric from these bundles, so I have a ton of solid fat quarter pieces in all different colors. Here's how I'll pick my fabrics for this. I'm looking at this, and the teacup here is catching my eye. The red teapot does as well, but I don't want to use red. I'm going to look for something in here, and actually that one's a pretty good match. I think I'm going to pull that, and then what I'll do is just hold it up to it, because we know this is going underneath the teacup. That looks really nice together. That'll be for one. Let's pull the next one. With this one, the blue does stand out, but I like pink. The pink flower also stands out. I already highlighted this aqua cup, and I'd rather highlight pink than the blue for this. I've got a couple light pinks here on top. That one's actually pretty good. That one's a little pale. You can see this one's kind of purpley. This is a darker pink. I think that's too dark. That one's not bad. And then these go pretty dark. You could highlight the red from the cherries. We've got another kind of purpley color again. That one doesn't seem to match. And this is how I pick. I just hold stuff up to it. That doesn't look good. And I see what looks good. I've got 2 choices here, the pale and the darker pink. I like both, but this reminds me almost of a baby girl pink or a ballerina pink. I'm going to set that one aside, even though I think it would look really good. And I'm going to go with the darker pink. You can set them next to each other too and make sure you like the way everything looks together. That looks good. Now I have to pick inner and outer borders. We've got an inner border, which is going to be 1 inch finished, and an outer border, which is going to be 2 inches finished. The inner border, being only an inch, gives me a chance to pull another color from this and sort of frame out my project and try and make it pop. When I'm looking at this, in addition to seeing the cups and the pots, I really like the bird. I kind of want something that's going to bring out the bird. We've got yellowy gold, kind of a lime green. I'm more attracted to the yellow color, and I actually have a bolt of really bright yellow. It may end up being too bright, but I pulled it. Let's look at it. I haven't even opened this yet. This is a 10-yard bolt of Kona corn yellow. You can see it's got a little bit of an orange to it. It's a nice bright yellow, and remember, this is only going to be an inch. This is going to frame it out really nicely. I think it's going to help bring out the yellow in some of these birds and the flowers. And by using a solid in the border, I have the opportunity to work with a contrasting thread if I want. We've got those little teacups in the borders. Maybe I want to make that stand out. That's an option. I'm going to try this and we'll see how this ends up looking. Now we have the outer border. Since I'm using solids for the blocks and a solid inner border, I wanted to pick a print. I have this Robert Kaufman Flower House Basic Blossom Dots. It's pink with white dots and it's got a variation of color. This is another 10-yard bolt. I actually have this same print in a couple different colors. I also do long arm quilting and sometimes people need backings. That's another reason why I've got several different kinds of bolts in my stash. I like the way the yellow looks next to the pink. It blends really well with my solid pink here, with the pinks here and here. I think that's going to look good. I did decide I'm going to go with one color thread throughout for all of the quilting and piecing. I want to make it nice and easy. I have this color of Floriani. It's kind of an off-white light cream color. Let's talk about picking the background fabrics for these. We need background fabrics for all of our teacup blocks. A lot of times I go with white or off-white. I thought I'd have some fun and go into the closet. It's a really full closet. I guess 2023 was a rough year on me, huh? November 2023 low volume fat quarter bundle. This is from Fat Quarter Shop. I didn't sign up for this, but periodically they put things like this on sale and it'll be a really good price. So I buy it and it goes in the fabric stash. Low volume is generally a white or an off-white with a smaller size print, usually softer colors. There are some brights in here, and they do give you a page on the inside that gives you all the information on the fabrics. I thought I would see if there was something fun in here I can use. You can see it's not open. So let's look at this, and we can set it next to our fabrics. Now, if you've got a quilt shop near you, you can do this. You can pull stuff, you can ask somebody to help you, and they'll do this. They'll pull some stuff, line it all up, lay it out, you bring your pattern with you, and they can help you pull fabrics. This is really nice. This has a heart, and it looks like a little ribbon, so there's no color to this one. It's just kind of a white with a little bit of gray. This one has apples on it. I don't think I like that for this project. Look, there's cherries. Let's pull the cherries out because there's actually cherries as part of this print. Here's the cherry fabric. That looks really good. That would make a fun background. Now the question is, do I have enough? Let's look at our instructions. Here's our materials needed. I went ahead and marked what's what to help me. Fabric 4 are the background pieces. You can go across here. I need 1 fat quarter. I have 1 fat quarter. I'm super excited. Now when I look at this fabric, I can see through it. Like I can see my hand through it when I look at it. So I have to decide if I want to use Fusible on it. Because as we build out our pieces, we'll be lining up, building, flipping, folding, and I may see some of the other fabrics through the backing. Fusible will help. Personal preference. In your block project instructions, if you go to page 2, we've got cutting diagrams for our fabric. Fabric 4 is my background. Here it is right here. You can see you're going to use almost the entire fat quarter. Here's what I did. I added up all the sizes going along the bottom here. So here's all the inches. It comes out to 14. So all of these pieces together are 14 inches. My fat quarter is about 18 inches. What I can do to make it easier to use Fusible is to cut myself 14 inches of Fusible, fuse it on the back, and I would just go all the way to the top. You can see how you're going almost to the top, and then cut my fabric. Rather than cutting all of these little tiny pieces and then putting Fusible on the back of all the little pieces, I'm going to put a big piece of Fusible on the back of that fat quarter and then cut these pieces. Everything else I'm going to use, I'm not going to need Fusible, especially these. These solids are starched really heavy. They almost feel like paper. I starched them very heavy for that project. These fabrics are not starched. You're not going to see through these. These are a nice thick quilting cotton. This cherry fabric is Rachel Erickson Citrus and Mint Designs, Riley Blake. For the solids, the pink and the blue, they're Bella solids. These are all the numbers for the pink. My guess is I'm using either number 4 or 5. I think it looks like number 5. That would be my guess. And then the blue, I think I'm using number 2 for the blue. Yeah, that looks like number 2. There's number 2. Those are the Bella numbers for the solids. I'm going to put my Fusible on the back. I'll be using Pellon SF101. Kimberbell Fusible backing works as well. I think I'm down to little oddball squares of that. I'll have to get some more. And let me know if you liked seeing how I selected the fabrics. Would you like me to do that every month and talk about fabric selection and colors? Or do you prefer it when the video just starts with everything cut and ready to go? There's always chapter markers below in the description box. So if there's something in particular you need to see, you need to rewatch, or that you want to skip, you can do that. You can look at the timestamps and the chapter markers. We're also going to need to cut our batting. We're making 6-inch blocks. So I'm going to cut 4 7-inch squares. I always cut an inch bigger than the finished block. When we stitch out the borders, I tend to use scraps. We'll measure some of the stitch out lines when we're working on the borders, and I'll show you the easiest way to make use of some of those stitch out lines. That's going to help you trim your borders, and it can help you figure out how wide you want to cut your border fabric. You'll see I have a note, inner border. I wrote 2 inches above 1.5, and I wrote 3 inches above 2.5. I always cut them a little bit bigger. I find it helps me with fabric placement. There's also a note to cut the border strips 1 to 2 inches longer if using the quilting. When you look at the length, go ahead and add a couple of inches to that. As far as binding and backing, I haven't cut it yet because you can see I'm thinking I might make this into a pillow. I have a chair that I sit in at night, and I do my hand stitching like cross stitch and embroidery, occasionally knitting or crochet. And I could use a nice pillow for that chair. Help me organize my fabrics as I cut. I have some magic pins. They're the kind that you can iron over. I numbered them with a Sharpie, 1 to 15. I've got 2 sets. I have these 18-inch design boards, so I'll have the blue colorway on one and the pink colorway on another. I've got everything cut and prepped. I've got a board for each of my cups. There's 2 of everything on here. Remember, I'm making 2 with this color combination and 2 with this color combination. My outer borders, my inner borders, batting, got batting for the mugs over here. I'm going to be using regular 7511 embroidery needles. I've got my thread. I'm going to be using this HBI no show mesh medium weight. This is very similar to Kimberbell light mesh cutaway. Let's get started. I'm on a baby lock meridian. My files are on USB. Let's look at what comes with your perfectly pieced monthly subscription as far as the block files. You'll see that you get 2 versions. Here's the 2-inch, the 4-inch, the 6-inch, and the 8-inch. There's one without quilting and one with quilting. This gives you a couple of options. You can piece the block on your stabilizer, so it's just fabric and stabilizer. You can piece a bunch of them, sew it together, quilt it yourself with your clear blue tile, send it to a long armor, or maybe you just want a piece block. You want to add it to the back of a jean jacket, make a bag out of it. You don't have to use batting and do quilting. In my mystery quilt video, I'll link that below. I use this one, the 8-inch block file with this quilting that came with it, with the flowers and the leaves and the little detail here around the saucer. I want to use something different today. I don't think this will necessarily look good with my fabric. My fabric is pretty busy. I want something with a little less going on, something that's a little cleaner. And I want to show you how you can pick your own quilting. Let's say you picked a Halloween fabric, a Christmas fabric, maybe something seasonal, and you don't want to use these flowers. With your Perfectly Pieced subscription, you do get block by block quilting. You could use the block by block quilting that comes with this if you like. Here's a 6x6. Let me bring that up and show you. Has a different look, still has these flowers. They kind of look like little floral buds with the leaves on them. I want something different. I'm going to hit cancel. And I'll show you the quilting I picked out. I went to my Clear Blue Tiles Essential set and I picked the loops file. This is a 6-inch block by block. It's not the Clear Blue Tiles version. It's the block by block version. They give you 2 different files for each one of the quilting designs. So you have loops, Clear Blue Tile version, loops block by block. You'd want to select the block by block. This is a nice, even, overall, clean quilting look. It'll blend into the background and it won't take anything away from my fabric. I'll be using that today. But the first thing I want to add is my teacup block. We'll go back to the beginning and I'm going to do 2 at once today. So let's bring up embroidery files, the 6-inch without quilting. If you like this quilting, you would just bring this up, duplicate it, you'd be ready to go. But I thought I'd show you something different today since I already did that in the mystery quilt video. Here's one. It puts it in the middle. I'm going to hit edit. I need to move it. I can drag and drop, but I'm going to go ahead and use the arrows. That way it'll stay centered. Move it to the top, hit OK. We've got 2 duplicate keys. This one up here is the regular duplicate key. This is the border duplicate key. The difference being this one will complete the first one start to finish. And if you use the border duplicate key, it'll do the same thing on each block. So step 1, step 1, step 2, step 2. That's why I usually select this one, as long as I'm not doing a thread change. I'm going to add one below. They're too close together. I need to space them out a little bit. All set. We're going to hit OK, add. I'm going to bring up my quilting file, which is on my machine. Set. And you can see it drops it right in the middle. I have to move it. One thing you'll notice is these outside lines match up. Do you see how the outside line on the block matches up? Let's hit edit, move, and you want to fix it so everything overlaps like that. I happen to bump it straight to the top and it lined up right on top of the teacup. I'm going to hit OK. We're going to duplicate that file as well. Add it below. It's not in the right spot. If I use the arrow out key, I can get it to where it needs to go. Now I have to be careful. That's too low. There. Now all of my outside lines match up on both of my blocks. I'm going to hit OK, memory, save it to my machine. That way if something happens in the middle of my project, I can pull the file up and pick up where I left off. Let's hit embroidery. Now you'll see the first thing that it shows is the piecing template because I loaded the cup file first. We actually have to start with a batting placement line. I'm going to go to the needle minus plus, and instead of going down through all, I think there's 15 pieces of fabric, I'm going to go up from the bottom. Let's hit up. There's a background quilting for this one. There's my crosshair. Crosshairs here, background quilting. We need to go up a few times until we see the first box, and it's going to be a blue box. One more time. I know it's blue because I know my machine and that's its default color. If I went up one more time, I'm going to see a black box. This is actually the trimming line, the last step for the teacup block. I don't want that. I'm going to start here. How we're going to stitch this out is starting with this box. It's a batting placement line. So it'll stitch batting placement. Here's your crosshairs. Batting placement. Now it does this block. That's why I use that border duplicate key. It'll do the same thing twice. Then we'll cover our placement line with our batting. Batting tack down. Batting tack down. That's all we're going to want from this file at this time because the next step is a fabric placement line, but we're going to piece our blocks. So then we'll have to come back to this screen, go through the fabric placement lines, the fabric tack down lines, and we're going to skip over the quilting. And then we're going to stitch our piecing template out on the batting. I have my stabilizer, my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. The thread color I selected is neutral. Let's start our blocks. We're going to start with that batting placement line. Grab your batting, cover the placement lines. I'm going to add a piece of tape because I'm using this Hobbs 80/20 batting. It's a little bit puffier than the Kimberbell batting, and I'm going to watch it and make sure the batting doesn't move. We're going to stitch out the tack down line. Both pieces are tacked down. If you use tape, remove the tape, and you want to trim everything outside of that tack down line. The batting is trimmed. But the next step on our machine is actually a fabric placement line because I'm using a background quilting file. I'm going to hit my needle minus plus, use the double down arrow. It's going to go through each full step, and my hoop is going to move. What we want to do is go all the way through the background quilting and get to that piecing template. That's what I want to see. We want to stitch this out on our batting. We're going to stitch out the piecing template, and I'll work through the first few pieces of fabric, and then the rest I'll set to music because I already did the full block tutorial with the mystery quilt video. Let's stitch out the piecing template. The piecing template has stitched out. Make sure you've got your instructions next to you. This picture is going to be very helpful. We're going to start with fabric number 1, which is inside of the cup handle. Mine is the cherry fabric. I've got some cherries right there. I'm going to see if I can manage to center that so I'll have the cherries visible. That looks good. I'm going to add a piece of tape. We'll go to the top. I've got one right here on this one. I think that'll work. The next thing we're going to do is stitch a trimming and placement line. I need to remove my tape and I need to trim off this part. Everything that's on the right hand side of that trimming and placement line. Those are trimmed. I'm going to grab my fabric too. If it has a right side and a wrong side, make sure to flip it right side down. You want to center it right along that line that just stitched out, and then we're going to stitch the seam. I am going to add a piece of tape since I'm working with the puffy batting. Once that's stitched out, if you use tape, you'll want to remove the tape and you're going to flip your fabric over. You can press it over at the ironing board, you can finger press it, you can use a little roller. I do like to finger press. We're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. We're going to do the same thing. The block is built using the same steps throughout, so that's a trimming and placement line. We're going to trim everything that's here outside of that trimming and placement line, and then we'll get our piece 3 fabric. Let me grab that. You'll place it right side down. Mine's a solid. It doesn't really have a right or a wrong side. Centered along that line. Add a piece of tape if you like. Stitch the seam, flip and press. I'm going to go ahead and set the rest of this to music. If you want to watch it slower, step by step, the mystery quilt block video with the full stitch out of the 8-inch teacup block will be linked below. It's the same process. I'm going to go ahead and go through this, and then we'll pick it up after we're done piecing. I'll talk about pressing your block and how to get to your quilting. We have all of our piecing done. I want to take this over to the ironing board and give it a really good press before I stitch out that trimming line that's going to go all the way around the block. If you used any paper tape, make sure you take off all the paper tape. If you're using this HBI stabilizer, be extra careful with your iron, and in general all stabilizers, but I don't use the highest setting on my iron if I'm using this stabilizer because it will melt if I hit it with my Oliso on its highest setting. Everything is pressed. I did add a little tape here, and at the very top after I pressed it because the fabric is still flipping up even though I pressed it and used a clapper and tried to flatten it. We're going to stitch out the trimming line. I recommend sitting and watching. It's just going to stitch out a box around your block. You've got lots of fabrics and folds. You want to make sure your presser foot doesn't get caught. That line has stitched out. Now we need to advance to our background quilting. You can see it went to the beginning of the background quilting. We just need to advance to the quilting. That's what I want to see. Let's stitch out our quilting. These are quilted. I have to make 2 more. I'll make those off camera, then we'll trim our blocks and we'll move on to borders. All my blocks are done. Here's the first 2. And here's the next 2. We want to go ahead and get these trimmed. The first thing I like to do is trim away the excess stabilizer and separate them. I'll be using the orange pop rulers to trim these today. I spent some time showing how to work with these on the block tutorial for the mystery quilt. Same block, just a larger size. I'll link that video below. I'm going to go ahead and do this really quick, set it to music so we can work on our borders. If you have orange pop rulers, there's a 6.5 inch. You can center that, and then there's a larger size, the 8.5. So you've got a chance to use two, so you have a little extra room for your hands. It's time to start on our borders. I did not put Fusible on my border fabric. I starched my border fabric with this faultless heavy finish. Pretty much saturated the fabric, let it dry, and then ironed over it. Starch does shrink your fabric. If you're working with yardage, it shrinks it selvage to selvage. If you're working with jelly roll strips, same things. It'll shrink it the length of the strip, but not the width. So if you ever want to use spray starch, do that before you do any of your cutting. We're going to start with the inner borders. We need two for the sides. They need to be at least 12 inches long. We're going to sew those on first. So that adds an inch to each side. That means the top and the bottom have to be 14 inches. Let's go look at our border files. The inner borders are the 1-inch files. Let's bring those up. If you watch the mystery quilt video, I spend some time discussing border file names, measurements, why sometimes the measurement doesn't match the file name, and so on. So I'm not going to go into that in this video. For the 1-inch border, I pulled up the 14-inch because it's 14 inches. I'm going to need two that are 12-inch and two that are 14-inch. If I bring up the 12-inch, you'll see that it's 11.75 inches long. So that's not long enough. I'm lucky that I've got a 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. So for my inner borders, I'm going to do the 1 by 14 4 times. We're going to do this in one hooping because it will all fit. So there's our first one. I'm going to slide it over, edit, border duplicate, side to side. I need 1, 2, 3 more, and then I'm going to spread them out to maximize the space in my hoop. I'm going to hit OK, save it to my machine, and we're going to stitch these out. I've decided to have a little more fun than beige for my borders. My inner border is yellow. It's this color. My outer border is pink. It's this color. So I'm going to swap the colors, put pink on the yellow and yellow on the pink. These are the color numbers. I also have this sticky note on my machine in case I'm using a neutral thread. Borders. Visible thread for the fabric placement line. If you've never watched any of my videos with the borders, once I discovered this, you'll see why when we go to trim our threads. Since the inner borders are going to stitch start to finish, I already filmed borders on the mystery quilt video and several other videos. I'm going to let this stitch out to music, and then when we go to stitch the outer borders, I think we're going to need multiple hooping, so we'll stop and we'll talk about that. I'm going to put the pink thread on my machine and stitch start to finish with the pink for my inner borders, which are the yellow fabric. The inner borders are done. I'm going to take this out of the hoop, set it aside, re-hoop some stabilizer. We're going to start on our outer borders. We need to figure out which files we want to use and how we want to do our hoopings. Let's talk about picking files for our outer borders. We've got our 6-inch blocks, 1-inch inner borders. So you end up needing 14 inches on the side, 16 on the bottom and on the top. We're using the 2-inch borders for the outer borders. We've got a 7, 10, 12, and 14. My immediate thought for the sides is the 14-inch border. Let's bring this up. Look up here. It's 13.15 inches long, not quite 14. So if you take an inch, subtract out that 0.15, you get 0.85. Divide that by 2, because you're going to center your border, and then you come up with 0.425. So almost half an inch short on the top and bottom if you want to use this for the side borders. I'm going to try it. We'll see what happens. So this is going to stitch out just like I did the inner borders. I'll do that one off camera. Let's work on the top and the bottom because we need at least 16 inches across for that. Top and bottom borders need to be 16 inches. I've got 7, 10, 12, and 14. I don't have a 16. I have to do this in multiple hoopings. If you have a 5x7, you'll have to do 3 of the 2x7s. I have a choice, the 2x10, 2x12, 2x14. Let's bring up the 2x10. 2 by 10 is 8.26 inches long. If you double that, you're stitching them end to end, you've got 16.5 inches. It'll fit, but it'll be a little bit tight. Let's go back and look at the 12 inch. The 12 inch is really 11.64 inches long. If you stitch out 2 of those, you'll have 23.28 inches, which is more than enough, and I have enough fabric to do that. I'm going to pick this one, and another reason I'm going to pick this one is because I know I'm going to have extra, so if my little 14-inch borders need a little piece stitched onto it, I can do that because I'll be cutting off extra. Let's set this. We'll move that over, edit, border duplicate, add one on the side. We're going to space it out, give myself plenty of room, save this to memory. We're ready to go. I have the yellow thread on my machine. What I'm going to do is stitch out my first set of borders, and then we'll talk about what you need to do to join your first set of borders to the second set. Here we go. The first part is done. Let's go over to the table. We need to get these out of the hoop, and we want to separate them. When you separate them, you're not trimming any of the fabric. We just want to get rid of the excess stabilizer. Once you've got these separated, the extra stabilizer trimmed away, rehoop another piece. We're going back over to the machine. We're going to go through the first few steps. We're going to do the batting placement, batting tack down, trim the batting, and stitch out the fabric placement. We're going to stop after we stitch out the fabric placement line and head back over to the table. Here we go. We're over at the table. We're stitched up through the fabric placement line. It's a little hard to see because it's in yellow. You want to have some tape ready. Grab your strips that are already halfway stitched out. I'm going to start with this one. Here's my teacups, and then I have blank fabric. There's all different ways to match them up. I'll show you what I do. You might find a different way that's easier for you, but this usually works pretty well for me. It isn't always exact. You just do your best, and if it doesn't line up exact, don't worry about it, it'll look good. Here's the quilted part, unquilted part. Here's the back of the quilted part. What you want to do is line up your lines, and where this one ends, right here, you want to line it up where this one begins, right there. So I kind of go like this, and I get a rough idea where everything is matching up. It's very slippery today. And then I start to roll it down until it looks like everything matches. That looks pretty good. Sometimes I've got to get down in front of it, which is hard to do with a tripod. That's better. I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to go ahead and tape it on both sides, and then we're going to double check it when we get over to the machine. I may have to move it. I just do my best. Here's the next one. So same thing. Here's the stitched side. Here's the blank side. Try to match everything. Slide it. Get it all matched. That looks pretty good. And then I'll go ahead and add a piece of tape at the bottom as well, and then if I have to make adjustments, I can do that over at the machine. What I like to do is hand crank my needle. I'm slightly over this direction, like really, really slightly. Just moving it and pressing the tape should take care of it. Let's see. Yep, that looks good. I think that's fine. So what I'm going to do is stitch out the tack downs, and that'll give me a double check to make sure everything's straight. The needle right now, that's interesting. My needle right now is inside of this cup, so that means when I tacked this down, my strip needed to go up. I want to shift the design, and then of course I'll have to double check for this one. What I need to do is shift this down a little bit because it's ready to start on this cup right here, and my needle right now is inside the cup from the first part of my design. If I hit layout right now, it's not going to let me do anything. So what do? I hit return. Now this does reset my design, but that's okay. We know how to advance, move back, and move forward through our design. I can hit the move key now, and I just want to move this down a little bit. Probably about 5, maybe more. Let's go with 7. 7's a lucky number. Let's hit OK. Embroidery, you see where it is? I need to get to the quilting. Needle minus plus. I'm going to go up from the bottom. 1, 2. That's where I need to be. Let's go see where that is. Let's needle down. Wow, that's just inside that thread right there. I can probably move it a little bit more. Let's go ahead and do that. 7 was almost my lucky number. I'm going to have to hit return. Let's go down 2 more. Down 2. Hit embroidery. Needle minus plus. Up 1. Up 2. Let's go check that again. I'm going to hand crank my needle right where I want it to be. The cup it's going to stitch out goes the other direction. Their little corners look like they're clanking. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this out, and then when the needle moves to the next strip, we'll check the design on that one. I stop my machine. When I needle down, I'm way in the wrong spot. I need to adjust the design again. I'm not going to tell you how long I fussed with that. It was ridiculous. Let's check. That's pretty close. I'm going to go with that. Let's stitch out the last bit of quilting. These are all stitched out. Let's take these over to the table and have a look. What's great about this design is the cups are kind of at all these angles, so if you don't match it perfectly, you're not really going to notice it. My joint is right here. That's where I made the adjustment. Originally, this cup was starting to stitch inside of this cup. We moved the design. It came out great. I did a pretty good job matching that up. Let's look at the next one. Here's where I made the adjustment. I'm about 1 thread high on this side, but really you're never going to see it. We need to get these out of the hoop. We'll trim all our borders and we'll put our project together. Let's trim our borders. I've already trimmed all the inner borders, but I save one to do on camera. Here's why I like the visible thread for the fabric placement line. When you look at your border from the front, remember these are 1 inch finished, which means they need to be 1.5 inches. If you measure between these 2 lines that you can see here, these are the fabric tack down lines. They're 1.25 inches. So if you want to trim it from the front, you need to trim 1/8 of an inch outside of each of those lines, or you need to sew with an 1/8 inch seam allowance, which is pretty tight. Let's flip it to the back. When you look at the back, you can see all the stitching lines. Right here are my fabric placement lines. Grab my ruler again. From this one here to this one here, it's 1.5 inches. So when you look at this from the back, you have the correct measurement. If you get a ruler, I have Creative Grids rulers. My ruler has a 1/4 inch line. Visually, it's very easy for me to line up that 1/4 inch line right there along that inner line. And what that does, it gives me 1/4 inch seam allowance, and it helps line up with that outside line of stitching. Let's go ahead and trim that. You cut right on that outside line of stitching, and I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's flip it around. You can measure 1.5 inches from the edge, or you can do the same thing and line up the 1/4 inch here along that stitch line. I'm going to go ahead and trim that, and we'll set that aside. I've trimmed all of these. Let's look at our outer borders. Here's the outer borders that we had to do one piece and then another piece. The first thing you want to do is trim away any extra stabilizer. If you like to keep the pieces, you can keep the pieces that are big enough. Just be careful you don't cut your fabric. Trim that away, and then you want to separate the border strips. Let's measure these lines just like we did with the inner border. If you do that, you'll see you have 2 1/4. So again, if you want to trim this from the front, you have to go 1/8 of an inch outside of these lines. Flip it to the back. It's just easier. That's why it's helpful to stitch out the fabric placement line with a visible thread. These are longer. We need to trim them to 2.5 inches. I have a really nice long 2.5 inch ruler. Very convenient. This is a little harder to see because I've got yellow and then the white. I'm going to start by lining up this 1/4 inch on this side, and then I can feel for that outside stitch line. And I'm checking on both sides because it's a 2.5 inch wide ruler. I can feel it and I can see it. I don't know if it shows up on camera, but that looks good. I'm going to hold that in place and use that to give me a hand. My hands are big, but they're not that big. So let's start here at the bottom.
Watch your fingers. Going to go all the way to the top.
Take our ruler, line it up. I'm going to trim all of my outer borders and then we'll work on putting the top together. We need to start piecing our top. The picture has everything laid out like this. So you alternate the colors. You've got 2 of one color, 2 of another. If you're making this for a table topper, you could always turn these so the bottom faces each direction. When it's on the table, wherever someone is sitting, a cup will be facing the right direction. See how this is the right direction there, 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 and there. That's an option. I want to go ahead and lay mine out like the picture. What I'm going to do is sew them together with a 1/4 inch and then sew those pieces together. I'll go ahead and do that off camera and then bring it back and show you what it looks like. I've got my blocks sewn together and we're going with the theme that it just really is not my day to day. Do you see how you've got the line right here for this one, and this doesn't quite match up. This is a little bit shifted down, so the cups don't exactly match. It's shifted down, and this is shifted down. So the question is, do I want to rip out the seams and redo it? And the answer is no, I don't. I want to finish the video. If I was making this for somebody as a gift, I probably would pick it apart and do a little bit of a better job. But let's go ahead and put our inner borders on. What the heck? I've got 2 that are shorter and 2 that are longer. They're actually the same size, just the fabric is different. Remember how I stitched out the longer border? When you're attaching your borders, think about how you want them attached because they're directional. I'm going to put the saucers facing in, and when I look at the design, it kind of has a center point right about there. I'm just going to add a clip. Let's flip around the other way and let's do the same thing. You can just sort of look at it and there's a natural middle to the design. So I'm trying to line that up with the middle of the project, but I'm not trying all that hard because everything's a little crooked. So I know it's going to end up a little crooked. Let's go ahead, sew these on with a 1/4 inch seam. I'll probably press them out and then I'll have to trim and even them up. The borders are on. I'm liking the yellow. I think when this is all together, it's really going to look good. I need to trim these because my border fabric is longer than it needs to be. I'm going to grab a ruler and I'm going to line up a line with my seam, which theoretically should be straight. Now I know my top is not perfectly straight. You can see this piece is a little higher than this piece. When I sewed it together, that got sewed down a little bit. So I'm going to line up with this piece right there, this block, and line up this line on the seam. That feels good, that feels straight, and then I'm looking down here, that's also straight. Let me go ahead and trim that. This border is really even with the top of this. Might be a little off. And this one has a little more space because I know this block is a little short. Let's go down to the bottom. Now I don't want to cut any of this off. I want the whole saucer to be visible in my project. This block is sticking up via the camera more this way, and this one is shifted this way. So when I line this up, I'm going to line that up, just pick a line straight with the seam, line up with this block. I don't want to line up with this block because if I square it up, I'm going to cut some of this off, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to line up with this. The difference is very slight. I'm going to be able to catch it in my seam allowance. Right there, it does feel like I have a little bit extra. Just didn't do a really good job with some of the detail work today, and it's okay. Sometimes that happens. Now comes the fun part. Remember how I picked the one that's probably actually not long enough, but let's see. Oh, it'll be fine. Wow, look at that. It's just going to work. If I line up the middle here, when I lay this out, I can see the quilting should go about another of a 1/4 inch, and the same thing here, about another of a 1/4 inch. Remember how we talked about the length of the file, and it wasn't quite long enough, but it's going to be fine. I'm going to put a clip here, in the middle, and I want to line up with that side because this is the right length on that side. I'm going to clip that there. This is going to be just long enough. And then when I go this way, I need to line it up with this, not with the block, because we want it to be straight right there. I need to do the same thing on this side. Everything is sewn on. You can see how the design ends here. I'm going to have a small gap where there won't be any quilting. Same thing on this side, but that's okay. I'm good with that. I need to cut off the extra. Grab the shorter runs. Remember, you've got shorter ones and longer ones. We did 1 hooping for the shorter ones and 2 hoopings for the longer one. And I was concerned with, will this pattern fit? I have some blank space. This is going to be the side border. When you line it up, and you center the design, you've got 4 and 4. So here's the center, here's my center seam. The design ends right there. Here's where the design ends. Now I know I'm going to be sewing right here. I'm going to have a 1/4 inch give. So if I measure to that thread, it's less than a 1/4 inch. I don't think you're really going to see it by the time it's all said and done. Same thing on this side. I'm going to turn this towards me. I really want to make sure that I get the center where it needs to be. So I'm going to fold this in half. If you just heard a couple of squeak sounds, that's our bird, one of the birds. There's my center. I've got these sewn on and pressed. You can see there'll be a little space where there's no design, but I'm okay with that. I need to get a ruler and I need to trim off the pieces that are overlapping. I've got plenty of border for top and bottom. If you look at that, the pattern extends beyond. So what I can do is figure out where the center is. I've got 3, 3, 3, 3, 2. This is the center where these 2 cups are meeting. I'm going to use that as the center here, and then flip that over, clip it, attach it on both sides, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Everything is sewn on really pretty. I love that yellow inner border. It really stands out. I need to trim off the extra. This should be 18.5 inches. I can't believe it. It's 18.5 inches. It actually came out the right size. My stuff never comes out the right size. Smooth it out. 18.5 inches. How about that? I want to turn this into a pillow. If you're going to do stitch in the ditch and binding and make this a table topper, I'll have a video linked below showing you how to do stitch in the ditch. You would want to stitch this seam here, here, then your borders, like going around here, going around the white, inside of the yellow, and then outside of the yellow. And that would attach your backing fabric, and then you would do your binding. But I want to make an envelope back for this, and I have an 18-inch pillow form. We already know we're 18.5 inches square. I'm going to create an envelope back, and I'm going to use this pink with the white polka dots. I'm going to need 2 pieces of fabric. I want to cut it 18.5 inches, and then I want it to have some overlap in the middle. So half of 18 is about 9. So if I cut 18.5 by 12, that should be good. I'm going to go cut 2 pieces of fabric. I've cut 2 pieces of fabric 18.5 inches long, 12 inches wide. What you want to do is take the long part, so the 18.5 inch part, fold it over. A lot of times instructions say 1/4 inch. I usually end up going 1/2 inch because it's easier to press this at 1/2 inch. Do this on both pieces. So fold over one side, press it, and then you'll take it over to your sewing machine and add a top stitch. I've got the top stitch done. So you have 2 pieces, right sides together with the fold in the middle. So you'll just want to line that up. There's 2 ways to sew on the backing. You can do one piece at a time, this piece, and then do the other piece, which is usually what I do, but I'm short on time today and everything's a little bit off anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and do both pieces at once. I usually get more accurate results if I do one piece at a time, but again, at this point, I'm just going to go for it. So I'm going to clip it and make sure nothing is going to move, and then I'll sew all the way around. I've got the envelope back sewn on. That went surprisingly well. I caught a little bit right there, flipped over, but that's okay. I'm going to trim the corners. Not much bulk here, but I like to trim them before I flip it. And then we'll flip it And we'll put our pillow in. Let's flip this right side out and see what it looks like. You want to make sure to poke the corners out. I might have to get a point turner for that before I put the pillow insert in. I've got this flipped right side out. It looks great. I wish I could fit the whole thing on camera, but it's a little bit too big. If you're making a pillow and you want, at this point, you can go give it a press on the iron before you stuff it with the pillow form. But my pillow form is really extra poofy, so I don't think it's going to matter if I press it or not. Let's go ahead and put the pillow form in. I've got it flipped to the back. You can see I have my opening running top to bottom. Some people like to run it across. You can run it whichever way you want to run it. This really is a really poofy 18-inch pillow form, so I'll do most of this off camera. What you want to do is pull up the outside. It's this one here that's layering on top. Slide it in. Probably have to cram it over, and then you'll push in the other side. I'm not going to be able to fit that under the tripod. I'll do that off camera and bring it back. Here's the back. I managed to get everything in with no, what they call plumber's crack on my pillow. I have enough overlap, even though it's a nice big poofy pillow. The hardest part is the corner. Sometimes you have to get your hand in and feel for the corner of your pillow form. Like right now, there's nothing there. So I need to push down the corner. Now I know it's in the corner. I'm going to hold it with my left hand. I can feel the corner of that pillow insert, and then you just have to sort of work some of the pillow stuffing. It's almost like you're restuffing the pillow, and make sure to shift everything so that now it's nice and fluffy. Let's put this on a chair and see what it looks like. Here is our pillow. That looks great. I love it. This is going to go in my little stitching and reading chair. It's going to be really nice to have a little extra back support. Let's look at the borders really quick with the teacups. Do you really notice that this doesn't have a little more quilting? If the pattern continued, it would have quilting just like that. It would have another teacup. Not a big deal. Love the yellow with the pink. Really frames out the teacup blocks when you look at it as a whole. Do you notice it's crooked? I don't. Let me know what you think. Tell me if you made a table topper, a pillow, maybe you put all four together long ways and you made a runner. Let me know what you decided to do with your teacup blocks. Normally I run through what's going on the channel, but I think this video is going to be long enough. So thanks for watching. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Let me know what you think. Let me know how your teacups turned out, and I hope that you enjoyed watching all the little problems I had making my project and what I do to try to make the most of it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.